Welcome to Windsurfer magazine. Back in the studio, we are well and truly into the 85 litre board test by now. I think the Pyramid is probably our 5th or 6th board in the test right now, so we're pretty busy at the moment. But we've taken a moment out of a pretty windy week just to jump in the studio. So as you'll be able to see, we have got the Quatro Pyramid 6, the 89 litre version. Again, with any sort of Goya and Quattro product, the number in the name is normally the generation, so this is the 6th generation. So the Pyramid itself, it comes in 7 different sizes, from 70 litres all the way up to 100. The Pyramid is a bit more sort of defined for sort of wave riding, so it's a little bit of a shorter period in the range, so it's not going massive and it's not going super small either. We've weighed it, comes in at 5.9 kilos, again bang on with what Quattro are saying, and this one itself is 226 centimetres long and it's 58.5 centimetres wide. So I'll pass you over to Tris and we'll run through the Quattro brand claim.
Yeah, so the Pyramid is their thruster setup, as sort of indicated by the name, really. It is basically their ultimate waveboard. It's their benchmark waveboard, sitting next to the Cube in their range, which is their quad. Very much surf inspired. They come back, the heritage that Quattro come from is all kind of surf inspired. So this is the one with more rocker and basically more surf orientated outline. So, looking at it, it's a quite an attractive looking board. Yeah. I actually really like the sanded finish. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's got, it gives it that custom feel and look to it, which
quite minimalist. Nice, but sanded down, and it kind of draws the eye into it. Simplicity.
It's simple, and it also means you get on the water and really prove what the board can do. And with a red underside, it's quite a nice little touch.
Yeah.
So we're already looking at sort of observations of the board. I mean, when it came in, I sort of thought, it's probably Keith DeBull's sort of love child. Everything that he's sort of known and developed over the years. Yeah. He's put it all together into this one board. It's definitely a little bit specific, as you'll sort of see when we start talking through our observations. It's a little bit different from what we're used to. So it's got the drawn-in pintail on it. Everything looks to be sort of the stance, and the mast track fitting seems to be pushed further back.
It's quite compact. I mean, so basically the actual stance itself is not too dissimilar from the Goyas, but what's different is actually the mast tracks move back as well. So there's a fair distance between, on the nose of the board, but actually, everything is really close, and it's a really interesting one in that the Pyramid, by its name itself, I think people are sort of perceiving it to be fairly extreme, quite hard, and I suppose the predecessors that we've tried are quite dedicated to their craft, cross off, clean faces, that's where it's at, whereas I think the whole remit of this one is trying to make it a little bit more user friendly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as we mentioned, with it's definitely more user friendly. It's very similar fittings. The mast track is something that jumped out to us when we got it in. So we like to measure all of our boards that come in. We take a lot of measurements, most of which probably don't mean a lot, but it's good for us to get an understanding. This one really sort of made sure we were sort of checking out mast track position. So this one measures from the back of the mast track to the tail 113 centimetres. A lot of your other sort of standard, more all-round dedicated boards, they're sort of in and around that 120 centimetre mark.
Yeah, so, 117 to 120 is kind of
even 5 centimetres is quite a lot to then move it back. So that's going to be really interesting to try. Volume distribution, it seems pretty evenly spread out, which is.
And again, the 1 foot off measurement, it doesn't jump out. It's not that surprising. 38 centimeters is pretty standard, but like you say, there's a lot of sort of harmonious sort of shapes in here. With the sort of the rounded pintail. Everything looks very smooth, and there's no real sort of hard edges to it at all.
Yeah, cool. No, it's a pretty smooth looking board, so it'll be really interesting when we get it on the water. So as we said, the volume distribution is pretty even. When you look at the underside, it's something that seems to run very current through Goya and Quattro sort of boards. So they really start with a V double concave in the nose, sort of progressing back even to the mast track. When you get to your sort of front foot straps, you're sort of looking a little bit more as just a sort of double concave there, which is just coming from that V, so it's very close in there. And as it progresses to the tail, it's that mono concave.
Yeah.
As Tris sort of mentioned earlier when we measured all the boards, the spine, that sort of V, seems to run a little bit further back, obviously to sort of run in line with maybe, you know, sort of harsher to that rail to rail effect, so maybe the board's going to be quite good on the rails, but again we'll have to wait and see. If we take a quick look at the features that Quattro's put in the boards, Tris.
Yeah, so again, construction-wise, similar to the Goyas, you've really got that minimalist look. You know, everything's sort of sanded down. There is no sticker on the deck, so trying to reduce weight as much as possible without impacting upon durability. You've got the Quattro fin boxes, so they're custom-made, super light. Plenty of durability still in there, but the whole idea is trying to mitigate weight in a fairly critical area. And then when it comes down to the deck pads and the fittings, so the deck pads themselves are textured, segmented, contoured, and you know they've got plenty of heel cushioning built in within them, and then you've got the MFC foot straps, which are kind of second to none, and the fins themselves are all sort of carbon, you know, MFC fins. So again, super lightweight, good high performance. So the fittings themselves, you know, can't be doubted really.
Yeah, cool, wicked. So that's effectively the board sort of in a nutshell. As Tris said earlier, that sort of metallic silver sort of colourway cut through with the neon red that pops out in little bits is quite nice. So I think, as we may have mentioned, it's pretty windy this week, so we're going to get on the road, go and find some waves, and we'll see you in a little bit. Okay, we are back from a pretty intensive testing few weeks really. You know, we've had the Quattro, obviously it's a slightly different board to what the other boards in the test are, a little bit different geometry on it. We've tested it here at home, so at Weymouth Bay. We've been to K-Bay, Gwythian, Rossniker. It's been a pretty intense few weeks of testing, which I think we really needed to do for this board. I know from our sort of first sessions we had on it, we had very different thoughts to what we did on the second session, so I'm going to let Tris sort of start with that, and we'll explain how we got on.
Yeah, so first session was just in our local beach break, cross-on conditions, but fairly good waves actually, a little bit of power in them. And first impressions were kind of blown away, weren't we? We're actually messaging each other at the end of the sessions and just going, wow, that board is a standout board. I think powered on a clean open face, it was unbelievably surf-like. So you know, you had so much confidence that you could hold speed the whole way through. You could sort of snake down a wave, you could traverse a wave and actually feel that you had all the speed, all the time that you needed to kind of hit and kind of express yourself through the waves. And from that side, it was like, okay, this board is really beginning to stand out. It kind of made you feel like a bit of a superhero. So, you know, we were pretty blown away by that to start with, weren't we?
Yeah, and, you know, I remember that first session and it was just like super stripped back wave riding. It was just such a surfy, intuitive feel that it was like, the more you give the board, the more it's giving you back.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we had like a few more sessions on it. We went to Gwythian, where we had a sort of more float and ridey day.
Yeah,
and that's when the sort of opinion changed a little bit.
Yeah, so in really those marginal days, you just found like there was some boards you get on and it's super balanced. So it's very intuitive, very easy to float and ride. You know that you can kind of crab your way upwind. This one, it was trying to find that balance, and you actually felt like you were drifting downwind a little bit. It was harder to kind of maintain that pace and get up to the sort of the lineup. And from that perspective, it's like, wow, okay, so it's one of the biggest in our group test, and yet actually to try and find that sweet spot was quite tricky, wasn't it?
Yeah, especially I'd say like for myself, I'm 96 kilos at the moment on the 89.
At the moment.
Might go up, might go down, you never know. For me, it's kind of like that medium wind board. I can get away with a lot of 88 litres sort of float and ride if you're quite techy and you know the volume feels right. Whereas this one, you started really far back with that mast track coming back, so the weight of the sails further back. And there was quite a few times at Gwythian where it's float and ride, not enough wind. I just felt myself sinking off the tail, thinking, man, what am I doing? I feel like an absolute amateur out here. But then you go through these phases on it, I found. Like some days felt good, some days felt a little bit mediocre.
Yeah.
But as soon as that wind was there, that was when it really sort of came into its own.
Yeah. It was like that bit when you actually get onto the wave face and you unleash its capabilities, you were like, I'll make up for it, it'll make up for everything else, I can get away with it. But it's just those practicalities, particularly in, the frontal weather patterns that we have in the UK, half an hour you got power, the next half an hour, a front comes over and the wind totally dies. It's like, there are some boards that you kind of go, it's got my back the whole time, whereas this one, you're constantly questioning, that sweet spot. It makes up for it on the wave, but it's just all those other sort of practicalities.
And it was super interesting. We had the day at Gwythian, then we came back to Weymouth and Portland, and the next day we drove all the way up to Ross Niger in North Wales, where we had some pretty windy conditions. You're on a 4.2, pretty full power,
Stacked.
And all of a sudden the board's powered up, and it's
and then it becomes a lot of fun again. And so it almost doesn't matter whether the wave is a really clean cross off, an open face, or it's a really kind of tight, but so long as there's a wave, the board performs. Yeah,
a bit of power there, and the board does its thing. You almost feel like the sail is very neutral on there.
Yeah.
And which you can see with what the guys have done with the Goya Banzai Surf, for example, a very neutral sail, which does fit on this very well.
Yeah.
It just sort of blew my mind between those two different sort of days we had, and you got full confidence in it when it's windy. It's just those lighter wind days. It just felt, I don't know whether you need to size up a little bit, but we had Steve Thorpe, who does K4 Fins, try it, and he regularly sails sort of like a mid to high 70 litre board, so this one's actually quite big for him, and he still had sort of a similar sort of feeling to what we did. So it's certainly an interesting board. It's definitely got its place. So pure sort of wave riding, when you're powered, like it absolutely rips. Like you can't.
It's another level. It rolls from your heel to your toe so fluidly that it is stand out for wave riding. It's just those practicalities. There are other boards that are definitely more practical in sort of all the other varies in the conditions.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure there's different technique to sailing the board, especially when it's light. Maybe you have to sort of position yourself a bit further forward.
Move the track,
foot in front of the mast track maybe, but sort of as one of those boards is to jump on and go. It didn't quite have that for us. But then again, like Tris said, you get on the wave and you're like, oh, this thing's amazing. So a little bit of a love-hate relationship with it. And that definitely doesn't take away from the performance side of it. It just perhaps, if you're looking for one board that does all, you're not quite going to find it in there. So you kind of look at the range, you'd have that for your sort of powered up down the line or cross on just decent days. And when it's lighter, you sort of maybe look at the other boards Quattro have in the range. Could be the way forward for that one.
Yep, fair enough.
So I think, that's kind of all of our thoughts on it. It's definitely a bit of a niche board. Still rips, it's still very capable. It's just finding the right conditions. And, we've had good conditions with it, bad conditions. But overall, it's definitely a board that stood out in aspects.
I think if there was a day where you're like, okay, there's a wave to be ridden, it's the standout board. You're going to have a good time on it. Yeah. If it's kind of varying conditions, particularly float and ride, again, it requires more input. It's a little bit more technical to get the most out of.
Cool, so we're probably going to wrap it up there. We won't let you see all the videos of me falling off out the back of Vivian, but yeah, we're very, very impressed with it. And you know, maybe we can try and get a few more good days on it before we give it back to Bubble, maybe. All right, guys, well, don't forget to like the video, leave any comments if you've got any questions or want to, you know, see other boards from the range that they've got. Give us a subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.